X. I'm really intrigued with that tool just because of the level of fidelity that you can bring to the table.
Yeah, Framer X was one that when I was still kind of keeping track of prototyping, I would notice that more and more kind of either developers or designers were kind of like circling around in that space. I remember there was another one that began with a P. I want to say Palantir, but that's not right.
Protopie, maybe.
What is that?
Yeah, Protopie.
Protopie.
Yeah, something where it was strictly on mobile, and it had very mobile centric kind of engagement models to the prototypes that were done, but it was always with the idea that whatever was going to be created from the prototype was going to be applicable to a dev background, and that they could actually take what was done and bring that into the mix so that it could save them a lot of time outside of connecting APIs and databases and other things they needed to do to make sure that the data flowed into the prototype properly.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Ian, if we switch to you, it's kind of the same set of questions. I mean, your background with prototyping, how you currently approach it now, kind of give us a lay of the land in terms of your approach to it and how you see prototyping.
I first started working at a marketing agency where it's a lot of time is money processes. So you have to be really quick. And doing that for about 15 years, starting with actually more at the end of the process, where you see that it's more high fidelity, more UI design, and more about getting it over to the engineers and developers. But since the last few years, I'm still moving up to the first stage, the early stage, where it's much more about the conversation. That's more about getting to learn as fast as possible and getting it in. Exactly what Andy said, the fidelity is really important in that aspect, and choose the right tools to make that conversation going. So for me, prototyping is the second most important turning point in a process. First, getting the right problem to make it tangible, and then get the conversation going by putting something on paper or making something visual, and take from there. And there is no knowing, there is no correct, so there's no right or wrong. It's just doing instead of talking.
So what's interesting about what you just said is that you cut out slightly at one point, and it sounded like you said you've been doing prototyping for 50 years.
15.
Okay. Because I was gonna say, well,
I'm not that old. I'm bald, but not that old.
You certainly look dapper for somebody who's in their 60s and really knows their stuff. The coloring of your beard is on point, sir. It's very good. It's very, very good. So what do you tend to reach towards when you're doing your own prototyping? What are some go-to tools that you'd like to kind of work on?
To be honest, I always start with pen and paper. Just scratching and writing down. I'll just listen, and write on. Just simply scribble components or write it what they said. So really taking out the words, writing them down, and then stick them together and show it and see if I understood them, and if the concept is clear what they tried to explain to me. And I'll take from there and then building it up and keep learning. And if that's a bit clear.
How important do you think it is to start with pen and paper? Because for me, it's been a question of time. If I'm scrapped for time, then I typically just work in the digital space, knowing that I'm going to have to do some rework on the digital side of things. But if there's any time really to prep, I literally draw out on multiple sheets of paper versions of different things that I'm thinking about in terms of layouts, especially when it comes to the GVDS stuff. I look at it from an information architecture standpoint. What are the list of components I want to put in, and what's their arrangement on the canvas? When you do your pen and paper, do you look at things from a content perspective or more of a flow perspective? Typically, how do you kind of approach it from your side?
It completely depends on the context and what it is. But normally I start with navigation. So simply draw out lines, but I still, depends for who and which team I am in. Because if the client is there, you need something more visual. So I tend to go to more context and grab words. But with a team and with developers in there, I really go to structure and navigation prototyping.
It's funny.
Sometimes it depends.
Yeah, it's similar with me. Sometimes when I do pen and paper or pencil and paper, some of my sarcastic side comes out, and I'll write notes saying that, this is no way this is happening. And as much as I like to share those with people, sometimes I know I have to kind of like keep the comments to myself. But other times I just go like, what the heck am I drawing here? Like I go down a rabbit hole. I have no idea how I got there. And I look back at what I'm supposed to be doing, and I think, okay, I just did the equivalent of
Yeah.
doing looking at, it's like diving into Wikipedia and trying to find some information there and ending up learning about something I'll never use beyond a trivia game. So it's a kind of the same thing.
I recognize that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you sketch on with pen and paper, isn't that just wireframing instead of prototyping?
It's, oh, you're
Yeah,
asking Ian? Okay.
Well, both, I guess.
No, Ian's more important than me. So let's hear from Ian.
No, we all are. No, it's in my opinion, it is is it wireframing is words. I'm really difficult with words. I'm something I just do, and it's the start of a prototype. So it begins with just bringing it in my mind and what I tend to do, and that's also what Robert said. It's after I write it down, I put it digital as quickly as possible. Just because I forget maybe things or just writing things down, and I need to make it digital for me to make it more clear for myself. So, and yeah, is it a wireframe? A wireframe could be a prototype. So, what do you mean with the difference of a wireframing or prototyping?
I mean, if I were to put my own kind of approach to it, there's two moments with this process where I know I'm in a good space, or at least I know where I should start. So if I start feeling uncomfortable in my own head around all that's in there, like all the different data points and impressions that are rolling around, I have to get it out and put it on the paper so I can project out some of the stuff like data, arrangement, idea. Whenever I write an article, it's the same thing. Like there's an article that's just bugging me. It's like my son basically like coming up to me and asking me 20 questions in like the span of like 60 seconds, if that were even possible. That's the kind of uncomfortability it is. But once it's out and it's kind of can see everything on paper, then I can start making heads and tails of it. And I now do this thing where I don't try to do it immediately. I do a little bit and then I wait. And I come back to it either later in the day or the next day. And I find that I've given my unconscious time to kind of process what I was originally thinking. And with new information, even new things that have nothing to do with the idea, I come at it I keep the core, but I add to the perspective. And I find that at least 2 or 3 days of that, I come up with really something really tangible that I think is a solid core that I can just kind of design around. And that's where the application of actually putting it into digital form comes into play. But I approach it from an organic sense where it's my initial thoughts that are mixed up with emotions and perspective and ideas and data that need time to ferment a bit, even if it's on paper once it's out. And then I'll go, okay, good. The trick is that you can't let it linger for longer than that, because you'll get caught up in all sorts of other things that will vie for your attention, and it will get lost. So I have usually a 24 to 48 hour window that I have to get something done that's creative in the prototyping stage. If I can do that and start going through the motions, then I'll flip on the headphones, I'll get focused, put on my Pomodoro, and I'll start like doing half-hour increments of getting stuff done, and I'll start moving in a proper direction. That's at least that, but that comes from knowing who you are as a designer and knowing who you are as a practitioner. Sometimes you're still in an experimentation stage from a process perspective, but you have to have that experience and figure out what kind of animal you are when it comes to prototyping, when it comes to ideation and working within your system. And if you're self-aware and know that you can grow in different ways, but have that starting point, I think it's hugely beneficial.
Absolutely, that's a great tip. I do the same. Oh yeah, I want to just add on to that. That's a really great tip also. If you try to understand yourself and also know when to stop, because if you're really getting lost into space behind me, if you just put on things and prototype, but sometimes you need to take a step back, just take a break, and look at it again, and see if you're not going too far or too deep into depth, but it's not necessary for a prototype.
And you can feel when you're either in the idea stage of going off the reservation or you're not quite sure where you are. And that's where I ping people like Sandy, or I reach out to like other people in my network where I'll just go, can you look at this really fast? Because I recently did something where it was a critique story a long time ago about AJ and Smart. And it was their transition from going to an agency that did nothing but design sprints to being content creators. But it was meant to be neutral, but I wasn't sure if it was going to come across as being like overly prescriptive or demeaning. So I can sense that there was something there, but it was how does it make sense to kind of like what's the interpretation of the idea? And that's where if I feel like I'm going a little bit beyond where I need to, I'll grab a handful of people or just type in, is anybody around in general? And it's usually a race. Jerome's the first person to say, yeah, what? Because in Slack, he's always there. He's just like, hey, there, what? Nah. But it depends on the time of day too. And he's usually much busier than he was. So
I was going to weigh in for me, using paper and pen and paper, pencil and paper is directly corresponds with the level of confidence that I have, or the level of comfort I have around the topic, what I'm designing for. There's clearly times where I just jump straight into digital just because it's the right choice, because I know a fair amount about it. I know the risk is low, and so I'm going to go that route. Versus if I know very little, I need to when I get to pencil and paper, that's the perfect place to diverge, right? And really just throw everything down there, break it all apart, sketch a few ideas, annotate some thoughts. And to Robert's point, I love to do that and step away. I like to get away from it and then come back, because it helps me see gives me a fresh view of my own work. And there's days where I'll do that multiple times over the course of a week, if I'm really struggling or trying to work through something. And then there's other times where I can step away in 10 minutes and then I'm right back on track and heading into a digital format of sorts.
I think I'm a very.
Oh, go ahead, Sandy.
I think I'm a very digital person. Like, even if I need to draw, I would actually go digitally, like with the Wacom or something, because I feel like I don't need to spend too much time like transferring the paper versions to digital later on either. So
I do something funny where usually you would think that, okay, you say pen and paper and you get this vision of somebody taking like a piece of printer paper out, and it's 8.5 by 11. They have their place with their tea and they have their pens and their markers. And I'm like the most, I use Spartan, but it's the most basic. Like literally, if I need to write something down, I'll just look for the nearest like half-written Post-it note or notepad, something that just has like maybe a little bit of like paste there, and just start writing out what I have in my head. And the problem is that once I do that, I'll lose it, and it'll be like you can't find it. It'll be like I'll clean up, or my wife will clean up, and we just kind of shuffle everything. And the funny thing is, you put things in piles where you know where everything is. So you put these piles. Okay, this is Monday through Thursday. All the junk, the napkins from the sandwiches, the notepads, the books, everything stacked in like a logical pile. And you put it, and you try to put it in a convenient, neat space somewhere on your desk or on the floor, so it looks like you're quote unquote organized, but really what you're doing is deferring like that real like 10-15 minutes you need to sort things out, because the last thing you want to do is uncover something where you have to put time to it and you're like, oh, there you go, this is going to blow out my schedule. So you just avoid it. I mean, I purposely have something where I did a podcast with Rob Hamlin over at Leap, and I have these notes. These are like almost a week old. I'm going to look back at these and have no freaking idea what I wrote on this thing and text him back and go, hey, Rob, what was that song you wanted for your podcast? And he's going to go, mate, it's been 2 weeks. What the hell are you doing? So yeah, that's the only Achilles heel with this process. I feel good that it's out of my head and I can actually get ready to like create something like a podcast or prototype. But damn, if I don't do this and just go, oh, I'm free now, let's go see what's on the internet. And it's bad. I need a little bit more discipline in that regard. So Sandy, let's get into your prototyping mechanisms. Like, kind of, since you said you're digital first, I'd be curious to know kind of like your approach to thinking about designing and prototyping and getting a start from where it makes sense to you?
I don't know. I always just go with digital. Like I feel like I actually am faster using digital tools than like even drawing a rectangle or something so simple like that. I'm much faster with digital tools than my hands. I don't know why. I guess it's just me. So I always go with digital. Sorry?
Did you start with physical at one point, or has it always been where your work has started with digital first and foremost?
I don't know. I feel like I've been using digital tools forever. I mean, living in Hong Kong, we used to get this like those kind of CDs where you can just buy from any shops and still already have all the graphics programs in it. And my dad used to train me that way, I guess. Like he would install all these graphics programs in my computer. So I used to, like when I was like a very, very young child, I already started to do my business card digitally. Like, so from that, I think I'm very comfortable using digital tools. I think just because.
Do you still have those business cards when you were a kid? Do you still have those files somewhere?
Don't think
no?
so.
I wouldn't think so, but it would be funny if you could bring them up and be like, okay, this is my new business card design, and just kind of have that there. Although back then you were probably selling or promoting something completely different.
I don't even know what I was doing, actually. I don't even remember. I just remember I did a lot of different business cards for me, for my family, for friends, and so on. Even though we were just like in, I don't know, kindergarten or something. Not kindergarten, but like probably like primary school or something. But yeah.
As a side note, that's a great exercise to go back and look at old portfolios or work that you've done that's decades old. It's fun, it's entertaining. I think you often surprise yourself the work that you did.
Yeah, I have a lot of the stuff. I actually tossed some of it, but most of the stuff that I had back in the days when I was doing graphic design, like physical print and all of that, like doing promos and concerts, and even during my nonprofit days of helping out people, disadvantaged kids in Seattle, there's just tons of stuff that's there. I even remember from the business card side, I remember making business cards for kids so that they felt important, or they felt like they had some sort of like stature, and put their gaming name, put like what they excelled at in school. Awesome. And laminated them so they actually weren't just papers that they would get normally like tickets, but there was some care put to them. And some of them still come back to me this day and say, I still have this card. I keep it like in like my little junk drawer. But that's one of those things where I was talking about with Sandy. It's like, you know, I like seeing those things from the past and kind of having them come back up as as an example of something that you did that was worthwhile. Okay, so beyond what we're talking about with historical narrative, let's get into some examples of all three of us that have some prototyping so we can kind of illustrate how we approach the model. If let's say, who would like to go first in that regard? Who would like to kind of show what they have?
I have nothing to see actually to show. I don't know if you have something. Yeah, I can.
I'm so disappointed.
We can show our GVDS prototype.
Sure.
From you last
time. Yeah, we can do that.
Let me see if I can find the link quickly. Maybe Andy, if you have anything to show, you can do first.
Yes. Let me pull that up here real quick. I actually prepared a little board just to kind of show kind of how you can use Mural a little bit for prototyping. I can show you that if you want. But let me see if I've got one from the.
Dust all the sand off of that before you actually put it up on the screen. You know, because it's good. There's a lot of high winds behind you.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a few crabs crawling in. I have to keep shooing them away. It's a bit of a mess. Yeah, so let me, so GVDS, let's say 3.0. Wow, here's a board. Let's see. I actually didn't do the prototyping for this, but we did some of it here in the board, and people can begin to see how it took shape, if I can find it here. It's funny how the storyboarding sort of bleeds into the prototyping, right? It's sort of the lowest of the fidelity, and then you move into a more collaborative approach. And that's honestly, that's the way I like to use Mural, in a way that it's one of the things that I look at is when you're prototyping, it's a group activity, but oftentimes when you go deeper into the fidelity, people's skill sets drop off, right? They're not as familiar they may not be as comfortable with using some of the higher end tools. And so I like to keep it as much into a common tool as possible. And I found the most fruit just using Mural. And actually building a prototype in Mural, you can do a variety of things. I have, for some reason, cannot find the board here. So my apologies. I just don't have that. But I can show you, you want to see that board? Oh, there we go. Here it is, I found it. Okay. Can I share my screen? There we go. Hopefully this is the right one. There we go. So here's from GVDS 3.0, which was last fall. This was the team's approach at prototyping. And you can see here, these are fairly high fidelity. And we did start off with some other methods of kind of understanding what the journey was, and that was storyboarding efforts. And then we kind of broke apart the task, because one of the biggest challenges, I don't know if you all see this, but one of the biggest challenges is getting content for your prototype, right? Trying to put together realistic content that looks and feels like it's appropriate for the experience. And so I like to sort of divvy all that up, and I like to have people that work on content or kind of identify the content areas we need. And then we have people that are sort of working on the flow or the experience, and then the visual aspects of just putting it all together. And so Mural works great for collaborating on putting in the content and collaborating on some of the assets that you're going to need. And then you can sort of begin to build that out in a virtual way in Mural, and then find your way to a point where it's good enough to hand off to someone that may go offline with a higher fidelity tool, and then paste back their screenshots for additional review and feedback, which is really what you see here, where we have the screenshots and people were helping the person who was doing the higher fidelity stuff understand what needed to change. So I'll kind of pause there and let you all ask questions or comment.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, like to me, that is still storyboarding or wireframing, is not yet prototyping.
Yes, and it sets up the prototyping though, right? Because for me at least, the worst thing is to get deep into stitching a prototype together, and then you have to unstitch it because you get some new feedback in that stage that causes you have to make significant changes. And so, yeah, this isn't prototyping, but it is, in my opinion, really key to feeding a good prototyping effort. So.
Especially that collaborative effort when you're working with a team together. So. Yeah. And what kind of, like, when you said that after this, you're going to move it to a little bit higher fidelity kind of prototyping tool. Which tool do you normally go?
My tried and true is Sketch. It just has been, for me, the one that I'm willing to invest the most time in perfecting and developing my own suite of assets and kind of components and things like that I can reuse over and over and over. There are a lot of other tools out there that do very similar things, and sometimes I think it almost reminds me of way back in the day when you're doing graphic design and you either chose Aldus Freehand or Adobe Illustrator. They both got the job done, and if you'd started doing freehand stuff, you just sort of stayed doing freehand because that was what was familiar, and all of your workflows were engineered around, or the same for Illustrator.
Right.
Sandy, yes, am I correct? You're saying this is storyboarding and this is wireframing, but it's not prototyping yet. But I think this is a really important part for to prototype to start with. And my question to you is, how do you see a prototype? Is it something that is alive, that's moving? Is it an animation, or is it something you can interactively move to?
I guess the thing that you can actually use to test with the user.
Yeah. So it's a testing part, using testing.
Yeah. Like it doesn't really have to be high fidelity, like even if just like a wireframe, but like I guess the higher is better, but then even if it's even if just a wireframe, but having some frame that people can interact with and get their feedback, that already becomes a prototype to me.
Yeah, I understand. And that aspect, I see it's completely different on what client, what user, and if it's what I do is also sketch, of course. And if I'm with if I showcase to a client / and/or user, it's first going to a bit more high fidelity to get it more clean, because they can't see through a wireframe. It's a difficult conversation, but for my team, I definitely go with InVision and just a Marvel indeed, and put it in there. But as for like the GVDS, getting into the prototype, I think you like to see or mean is I use tools like Webflow, WordPress, and I think to make it more alive, but use really simple and try to learn what fits for you. Those tools have templates or components that you can stitch really fast together. So if you know a little bit of basic of coding or CSS and those interfaces of the sketch, you don't need to be a programmer or nothing. Just put in the blocks and just put in images and place them there, and it will interact with buttons. So there's a lot of there are a lot of tools out there that can do that: Draftium, Sketch, Marvel, Atomic, Prototype, IO, Origami, FramerX, XD. There are hundreds. So
yeah, there are lots.
So here's an interesting question to ask: is how do you think machine learning is going to fit into the prototyping world eventually? How do you think it's going to influence it or change it?
Well, I think, and that's the most important thing for prototyping, is time. So making and sure that you get the right, you can test as many things to learn so fast as possible. So if you have complex, especially for complex prototyping, and you can have an AI that creates interactions for you, for example, just drawing a line, and there are concepts like UIZard. I don't know if you know that one. Is a Danish company who made a tool that if you just sketch it and you upload that image, it will automatically build that in HTML. So it's right away at high fidelity thing that you can stitch together and make it interactive. And I think that's really helpful for creating and testing something in a really short time.
What would be your, I mean, I think all of us has a little secrets to make prototype really fast. What would be yours?
The secret of prototyping really fast.
Yeah, because I see you have done our prototypes. I mean, I was in your GVDS team and you were able to get something done really, really quickly.
I think if you have your setup or your library, you get your own baggage of components and a lot of scenarios. I've dealt with a lot of scenarios with I have done this, I've seen that before, of it's now this subject is about a booking, or it's about shops, or it's about telling something. And I save that somewhere, and I make sure I always have that in my cupboard to build as a puzzle together. And that's I think my secret to learn and build up my library of components to
I sometimes think that the things that we, oh, go ahead, Andy, go for it.
I was going to say, I would echo the exact same thing. I think developing your pattern libraries is key. And they don't, there are a gazillion of them out there. And, you can either use one that's already been packaged, or you may have created your own. It doesn't have to be that extensive in most cases. It really kind of comes down to probably 10, 15 components that you use most, and getting familiar with that. And then outside of that, I think speed to prototype is really understanding how to use your tool right, having the familiarity of the tool you use and being expert at that. But then the effectiveness really comes where you understanding what the testing script is beginning to look like, and then really being able to anticipate some things. And I can't tell you how many times I've been in the middle of a prototype And it wasn't only until the point I got to that level of fidelity when I realized, oh, there's something about this that we're gonna have to change or do differently. And being able to close those feedback loops quick really is what keeps your prototype moving fast.
That's a responsibility that's also really important to keep it there. Sometimes I notice that people are too tunnel vision and focus on one flow, and I would stay back. I'll kiss them, keep it short and simple, and set back and say, okay, is this relevant? Yes or no? You have to keep that on track.
I personally wonder when there's going to be a change in philosophy versus the value of opinions versus the value of data and the value of results, where usually prototyping involves a lot of perspective to get it embedded within the final product, and everyone has their say-so. But there's something that there's evidence to suggest that some people are trying an approach where they're trying to short circuit the notion that if you have some really strong personalities that would influence the conversation or the direction of a prototype, you could basically go direct to the customers that you're going to go after. And I'm not talking user-centered design. I'm saying you basically put something very basic that designers would like cringe at, saying like, well, there's nothing here. It's just like a blueprint of like a house. But funny enough, I bet if you experiment, you would find that people would actually gamify the experience and go, okay, well, I can click here, 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 and this is where I go. And kind of see what people actually do without influence or decision making. I think that it's not really in vogue now, but I wonder in the future if in the future that we may have, where there's going to be really limited funding and money in the system for kind of approaching design, and people want results faster. If it really comes down to what people react to and what they do, like literally the analytics are the things that validate the direction, irregardless of the opinions on the inside of what works and what doesn't. How does anyone feel about that? And to sum it up would be, is prototyping something where if it does go into the realm of execution only and less about opinions, does it fundamentally change how we do prototyping?
Wow. Well, I actually agree. I would like to see that they test faster and also make the prototypes based on true objectives and key results, because that's the most important thing and the goal of your prototype is to test if something is clear, and you could do that straight away. So getting that data is really, really important. And this is going to be weird, but I'm a sci-fi rookie. I like Star Wars. I like I like Jean-Luc Picard of Trekkie, and I have shoes. I don't know if you see it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
But this is my friend Yoda, and Yoda also stands for your own data. And getting your own data is really important to get those data in and get them as far out and test them as fast as you can.
And I almost think it's not really necessarily for people that really have put their ego and their personality in front of their designs. It's more validating what they're thinking and what their approach is, and then they can hang their head on that. But it's consistent learning against that, what you're calling your own data or Yoda. That's like, we're both on the same page about that.
I think your CEO has a prototype to show us.
He's building a monster.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So this is going to be a regular occurrence.
Robert, I think a lot of it also centers around, perception of risk, right? To me, the entire design process and the way you approach it is all about minimizing the risk of getting too deep into the equation before you have to back up and change, right, and pivot. And everybody knows that's going to happen. And I think if your audience can understand that a more execution style approach may have benefits for a certain type of project or effort, then I think it's perfectly acceptable to pursue that route. On the other hand, if the stakes are high, you might find there's some resistance unless there's some proven business cases around it for them in their market.
And case in point with our leadership in Washington right now touting the effects of mainlining Lysol or having hydroclock acquiring. I can't even say the name of it, but basically that's probably where execution driven philosophy doesn't quite work. It's like, let's just throw something against the wall and see if it makes sense. So to your point with prototyping, yeah, if there's more risk involved, then there's definitely going to be that pull back to say, let's aim before we fire, rather than just kind of saturate the space with different possibilities.
Yeah. And I kind of see I'm envisioning in my head right now a visual. I bet you Sandy is going to be all over it, but is really there's this continuum of fidelity and approach, and you could almost sort of kind of create a map of these kinds of projects typically fall in or start here for these reasons, and really sort of build out kind of a cheat sheet of sorts for newcomers or people that are trying to dial in the right approach.
Yeah. Sandy, let's get to what your example is that you had showed earlier that when we saw. I'd like to kind of like cover that in terms of your digital first approach to prototyping.
Sure. Okay. Let me share my screen. So I just experiment a little bit to see how we can actually prototype on Miro. And
explain what we're seeing here. What are you showing?
Well, so this is how I envision a prototype can be. Everything here is built 100% within Miro. I didn't use any external tools or anything. So basically you can like actually interact with it. And then I just have like a little go to button there, and then jump to the next screen and then build your portfolio. Then you can look at different images and you can go next. And the cool thing is you can also, not this one, but you can also like play video within Miro that's directly. And I'll show you the one that is actually everything is unlocked. So basically like all this stuff is just icons. I use the Miro icon library. I search like profile or something, and then just found the ones that I like, was probably this one or something. And then I just pull it in, change the color, like scale it. I mean, just build it that way. And all this stuff is just like a text box. So, I can just like do anything with it. And then, oh, actually it was a box, not the text box. And I just like add the background color as some border.
But you had to learn a lot of this through trial and error. I mean, you literally had to like go through the motions and like try out prototyping, try different things that seem to make sense within this space, correct?
Yeah, but the cool thing is like you don't actually have to start right here. You can just like have people to draw in boxes or bring in some really low finesse. Like the cool thing about Miro is you can actually interact with each other together, right? So like in a GVDS kind of setting, not everyone has the same prototyping skills, but they all are probably more or less familiar with Miro. So then asking them to actually do the storyboarding with you together. And right now you can actually prototype directly here. And like even images, right? Like you can actually just search images here. So I just searched some for painting. So instead of me going to like an external tool, try to find other images, I can actually find it directly here and bring everything here together. Yeah, so and this is just like a little link, like you can actually right click here and then get a link to this image. So you just copy, and then this is like, you just paste a link here, and then now you get the little button to go with it. I mean, obviously it's not like you're really clicking on the button itself, but for someone who may not have the access to real prototyping tool, I think that could be something that people can put together easily.
So
Very
one
nice.
question I had for you, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but since we're coming up at the top of the hour, I wanted to, for people that are new to the Global Virtual Design Sprint that are going to be in the space of trying out different types of prototyping, what are some of your own recommendations about kind of playing in the space and learning how to prototype within Mural?
I guess you kind of have to get familiar with the tool first, but prototyping is like what, on day 4 or 5. And when you use when you use Real 4 or 5 days, I think like you already know the tools pretty well. And I think the point is just kind of have to be more creative with the tool, because like tools is just that, right? Like actually they help us, but then almost like anything you can use to do the same thing, but you just have to be creative with it. Yeah. I think like all the stuff that I'm doing here is not even complicated. Like here, I just use the image search and I search for like, I forgot what I actually searched for. Probably like a phone UI or something. No, I forgot what I searched for, but like I just used the image search here, and then I found like an old iPhone screen, maybe iPhone screen.
I've been recommending pairing people up. So if say on your team, I think we're meeting in like 10 minutes or so, less than that. I always try to see if there's commonalities with designers in terms of kind of working in the same space. Maybe somebody who's more junior in Mural that doesn't know it, and pairing with someone like you who kind of does. And then there's a matter of kind of a back and forth in terms of what seems to work, what some mechanisms are. You can give URLs to folks, and it's a direct kind of feed to learning really fast in the space.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of features here people can use, but not everyone is familiar with them. I mean, when you just run a workshop, maybe you don't really need them. Like things like you can actually edit the mural colors, the sizes, and all that stuff here. Like you can actually create your own color palettes here, all that stuff. I think maybe not for someone who are just new to Mural will know how to use them, but they're not like, it's not very difficult to use. So, and
But
the
if they
great
work
thing
with,
is also, sorry.
But if they work with
Yeah.
an applied master of yourself, then basically it would be a way of understanding it far faster.
Yeah.
And the other thing is you can also like comment on the prototype directly, right? So it's almost like a real prototyping tool, but it's not. I mean,
Yeah.
if you have access to a real prototyping tool, it's great. And if you can get everyone on board and collaborate with you together, it's great. But this can be an alternative.
It's like pseudo proto, or pseudo prototype.
Yeah. What I like about this approach too, because you can use Marvel and Envision, and they have commenting. But what I like about commenting here is oftentimes I find people, they need to see a couple things together at the same time to have an effective comment. And this allows you to do that. If you're inside of a Marvel or an Envision prototype, it's just kind of one screen at a time. So you're swiping back and forth or doing whatever, trying to figure out what you're looking at and how it plays with each other. And this to me is just much more straightforward and probably is easier for your team to provide information on versus navigating some of the other tools. But that's just my experience.
Yeah, I know that Envision has collaboration boards like Mural, but the great thing I think about this is it's you're hacking it in a way that it works, and that's, I think, the most important thing is to seek out the level of prototype with fidelity, but also with whom you are making it. And if everybody in the team works with Mural and that works, then this is a great solution. Instead of trying other people to learn Sketch or another program who are not maybe savvy enough for other kinds of programs. So that's great. Finding ways to make it possible as fast as possible.
Do you have any Ian, do you have any recommendations in terms of where people can get started with prototyping in this space? Like they could reflect your own approach, but what would you recommend?
If in tooling, you mean?
Or just in general, like if you want to kind of get started with prototyping and you may not necessarily know or have a familiarity with it, what would you kind of recommend people try out or give a shot?
Geez, it's so broad, and it depends on which space is the conversation in building something. So then it would be sharing with Envision just sketches or Mural. But if you want to make it interactive, yeah, I would just start. For as I care, it could be Paint and just make JPEGs and put them up on Envision and start connecting those, making the puzzle, and start seeing links to make a concept clear.
I asked the question purposely because I had an answer in mind, but I wanted to see if it was reflective in what I thought. And I try to encourage people to screw up intentionally. So no matter what you do,
Oh,
you
sure.
want to,
Yeah.
you want to make the worst mistake you possibly make outside of hurting yourself or other people or damaging something that you have to pay back. The reason why I say that is because if you know where the gray space or the dark space is around what works and what doesn't, then it makes it a lot easier to kind of go, okay, well, I know how bad it can be. Now, how much worse can it go from there? It really can't. So let's see where we go. So
Yeah.
you could put 32 iPhone like backgrounds in there and make it so that there's this collage of mess. And then when you're done with that, you kind of go, oh, okay, that's that. And then you kind of get a little bit more serious and you try different stuff. And it gets you in the mode of play rather than test.
Yeah, I absolutely feel you. And I love to mess up. I had the same moment with Mehmet out of the GVDS. He took me as a user tester for something he made. And it was so, you put it into the wild, but messing up on purposely and then discovering things to get things better, it really gives you a kick because you're learning and you know ways to find things. And if you see something that could be better, that's what I love about it.
Yeah.
Andy, you had
I
the
would
last.
just
Oh, go ahead. Go for it.
I completely agree with you, Robert and Ian and Sandy, and I would just say be fearless. Be fearless. Explore, learn, and learning. To me, failure is really learning, and so fail as much as you can. Explore the boundaries. Be fearless, and you will soon find that you will have an immense amount of knowledge to do these types of things.
And go work for an understanding director and a nurturing and a one like Andy, and you'll probably go far in terms of like being able to understand the space. So, okay, we are at time. I only press this just because I've got something that with the GVDS that's at the top of the hour that I need to be present for. Again, Andy Davis and Ian, and there you go. There's. I saw that screen in there. Thank you very much for coming by and having the conversation about prototyping with me and Sandy. We're going to be back again next week, either on Thursday or Friday, whenever we have an opportunity to do so. Hopefully it was beneficial for everyone that was watching, including the one person I'm going to call out, see if I can get him to chat. Hyung, over there in APAC, are you there? If you chat and let us know that you're paying attention. Hey, he raised his hand. There you go. Right. And I got to check to see if anybody's on the YouTubes and see if anyone's there. Yeah, Sabu. Hey. And Jason.
I can have people over there.
There's a few people there. I was like, I want to check it out. Okay. Hello to everybody.
All the time we were just thinking we were talking alone here.
I was concentrating on the conversation and I thought, okay, the YouTube's going to take care of itself because usually there's a conversation happening there. And I only check it out if there's questions that come up. But all right, there you go. We're good. So so Andy, Ian, and Sandy, thank you all for coming on the show.
Thank you.
You know, enjoy your weekend. And as always, as we always say, wash your hands, social distancing, be kind to one another, and relax and be with your family and have a good time. Yeah.
You too.
Thank you.
See you soon.
And don't do anything. All right.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody. See you later.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.